occult book posted by Bloody Spaghetti. Can you imagine my shock and anger when my wife told me she was almost assaulted the day I returned from the hospital? At dinner, she told me about how that cretin from across the street tried to force himself onto her. Fortunately, she beat him off. The same piece of shit that I've seen complaining about women being mistreated, an advocate against all kinds of isms, ended up being a potential rapist. Who would have thought? I wasn't too happy to hear my wife had to endure such treatment. I was livid, boiling inside, but I had to keep my cool. I wasn't supposed to get stressed or do anything physical for a while. I was recovering from a pretty serious brain tumour and needed to rest. But how could I? A sleazy piece of shit nearly raped my wife. I couldn't. The night she told me that, I couldn't sleep. I was tossing and turning in bed, steaming under my skin. A strange impulse stewed inside of my mind. I had to punish the sick fucker. I had to make it clear he should never harm my wife or any other woman ever again. I was going to make it very clear to him. He's fucked up pretty badly. He doesn't know about the time I did behind bars. He didn't know what I was capable of. I was going to teach him. However, I was going to carve that lesson into his disgusting, sweaty skin. I made sure no one saw me head out to his place. I didn't need anyone to know about my little secret. Strangely enough, when I arrived at his place, I found the building to be brightly lit inside. I didn't know him personally, but the amount of light was rather strange. Knocking on his door, I felt something pulsating inside my head. A strange, nauseating sensation that turned into a familiar pain. Come inside. A cacophony of growls and shrill cries echoed inside of my skull. The ferocity of the sound nearly made me drop to my knees. My body started moving on its own accord as my hand pushed the door open and my legs led me inside. The walls pulsated and swam in themselves as my legs led me towards the living room through a brightly lit corridor. Each step felt heavier and heavier. My whole body felt heavier, as if I was walking deeper and deeper underwater. My head was pounding and my stomach twisted. Once inside the living room, I found myself in a room filled with levitating furniture. At first I was confused and somewhat dazzled by the strangeness of it all, but then I heard a pained moan from the corner of the room. My heart nearly froze when I saw the broken man huddled in the corner. His body is riddled with cuts, from which sprang maggots and larvae. My anger and confusion turned into a bone-crushing dread. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It wasn't so much the hollow shell of a man before me, but the thing that stood towering above him. A pale, winged, gaunt, almost skeletal figure whose wings were nothing but an ocean of wriggling tongues and eyeballs, swimming in the fleshy masses, their gaze piercing in every direction. The figure spun its head towards me, not moving its neck. A featureless, pure white face greeted me. A myriad of voices boomed inside of my head. Your debt is repaid. A life for a life. The voices cried and growled and laughed all in unison. The thing that saved my life came to collect its toll. A life for a life. My life for his. The figure's head turned back to the parody of a man splayed across the floor, and one of its snow-white arms started metamorphosing. Chunks of flesh and other organic material grew out of the bony limb, bubbling, metastasizing like a cancerous growth without control. It twisted and bent and reshaped and reformed itself into the shape of a 10-eyed, mutated front half of a dog. As I stood there in utter shock, unable to tear my eyes away from the abomination in front of me, I saw the canine limb slowly crawl towards the man who attempted to get his filthy hands on my wife. He was whimpering and crying, begging for mercy, oblivious to my presence. The creature wouldn't listen, and soon enough, the hellhound locked its jaws around his leg. The force of the bite crushed the limb and sent it flying with a fountain of blood, serenaded by sickening cries of pain. The dog must have liked it, as it went wild on the pervert's hopeless form, shredding it into a mass of shit and bloody chunks of human waste. The dying screams of that fucker ringed in my ears long after the deed was done, even after the winged creature disappeared in a flash of blinding light, leaving me covered in gore and bone fragments. I could still hear the sound of bones being broken and muscles being torn. By the time I stopped shaking and regained a feeling of my body, I had noticed something. The same occult-looking book my wife has. His copy was thrown upside down next to a little human skull, covered in dried up blood. Demon in a haunted ranch house. Posted by Pineapple Icy 2662. So, about 5 years ago, we used to live in the most haunted house we'd ever moved into. This home is where I spent most of my childhood, and it's the place where I started seeing and experiencing paranormal activity for the first time ever in my life. The home was a residential ranch-style house. The home was built in the year 1965, and it was located in a cul-de-sac neighbourhood. The home was originally located in a town called Langston, but it was originally registered through a town called Stanton, because Langston doesn't have a town of hall. I had 3 sisters here at the time. One of them was just my sister, who was 7 years old. I had 2 other stepsisters who were 4 years old and 16 years old. I was only 10 years old. We lived in that home for about 10 years, but during that time we experienced one of the most horrifying hauntings anyone could experience. It all began in 2010. Needless to say, we have a backstory. My older cousin, who is in her 20s, used to live in the house before we did. Inside the home was a lot of wallpaper. The bathroom was a strange, hot pink. The outside of the house was painted a yellow colour. However, she had some experiences sometime around in 2008 when she was in the house one time. She had seen this dark black shadow man when she was all alone. Then after that, a chair she had began to rock all by itself when no one was in it. Then another time is when she had heard an old man coughing in the living room, but it was just her and her kids. After them incidents, she had burned that weird chair and she had packed everything up and since moved out, and the whole house was all redone. All the wallpaper was ripped down and replaced with drywall, and the outside of the house was painted a grey colour now. I remember when we first moved into the house, when you first walked through the front door, you were first met with the living room, which was painted a red maroon colour. After that, there was the hallway and the kitchen, with both had popcorn sheet wall. After that, there was the dining room, which was all painted a yellow colour. Then down the hallway there was a bathroom and a bedroom on one side and two more bedrooms on the other side of the hallway. My sister was up in the middle of the night and she suddenly hears the toilet flush all by itself. She gets up to see who it was, but the hallway was empty. She was alone. Sometime in the middle of the night, both of my parents were talking to each other, and there was a little window behind them. Suddenly, both of them see this dark black shadow man looking in at them through the window. My mum was scared and her eyes were wide. She didn't know what to say. My dad would often feel watched by something inside the house. He said he often remembers seeing a dark black shadow man peek its head in at him and look through the doorways in the corner of his eyes. And when he would look to see who it was, it would quickly retreat and hide behind the door or a wall. He said it was like the shadow man would slowly walk up to him from the corner of his eyes, but it could never reach him. Every time he turned to look, it would quickly hide in behind the wall. He would see it almost every day inside the house and the garage until we moved out. My grandparents used to live with us for about 2 years in our basement over there, and they used to have an Xbox 360. They would always play, and every time they were done they would turn it off before going to bed. But in the morning they noticed when they woke up the Xbox would be turned back on. Almost every time they would wake up in the morning, they noticed that the Xbox would be turned back on despite them powering it off before. And my grandpa asked years later if it was me who was doing it, but I don't remember doing anything like that. Me and my sister were always scared to go down into the basement. Every time we were in that basement, we both felt like we were being watched. We felt this strong, bad and unwelcoming energy, and it made us scared to go down there. Every time I would go up the stairs, not going down the stairs, but only going up, I always felt and heard something following me up the stairs. I always felt this strong energy and heard these footsteps behind me, but every time I would turn around to look, no one would be there. Because of this, I would run up the stairs as fast as I could. My grandparents had shortly moved out after, and the basement was completely empty. No one else was supposed to be downstairs that day, but me and my sister had heard something coming from the basement one day. Me and my sister were doing homework in the kitchen on our computer when suddenly our monitor turns all the way up to max 100. It startled both of us. After like a minute later, suddenly we both hear this massive bang coming from our basement. It was a loud slam that echoed and shook the entire house, rattling everything upstairs. We both started to cry and freak out after my dad had run down into the basement to check to see who it was, but he was completely alone. Although what he did find was that one of our cabinet doors was slammed shut. He had to punch it back open. It was so jammed tightly. Also, my dad said he often remembers hearing noises coming from our basement, like things being moved around after my grandparents moved out. He said he would do his best to ignore it, so he wouldn't progress the activity. When I used to be younger, I would often talk to my bedroom wall, and no one would be there. I would just be talking to nothing, facing towards my bedroom wall, and I don't remember doing anything like that. My parents had caught me one time in the middle of the night. My talking had woke them up. They watched me from the next room over, and eventually I just fell down and went back to sleep. Another time, it was in the middle of the day. My sister goes walking down the hallway and she hears me talking. She looks into my bedroom and she caught me standing there towards the wall, talking to nothing. She walked away not knowing what to think. I don't remember any of this. Me and my sister's bedroom were only separated by a wall, and it's the same wall I would talk to, and both me and my sister always had heard knocking on that wall. We would hear knocking on that wall in the middle of the night, and it would wake us up, scaring us and irritating our dad, because he thought it was us just playing around. So he separated our beds as far away from that wall to keep us from knocking on it, but it still continued because it wasn't us. He began to believe us when it continued to happen. My sister had woken up one time in the middle of the night, feeling like she was being watched. She looks out her window and she sees this old man standing in the middle of the road, just staring at her through the bedroom window. We asked her what he looked like, and she said he was a very, very old man that was so extremely skinny you can see his bones through his skin. He was also very tall, and he was wearing really old clothes. He had white, long, scraggly hair, and both of his eyes were glowing green. He was just standing completely still in the middle of the road, staring at her through her bedroom window. She pops her head down and pops it back up again to see if she was just imagining it, but she still sees him there. But when she blinks, he's gone, and she's never seen him again. Years later, a lot more had started to happen. My dad was upstairs in the bathroom In the middle of the night, he goes back to bed when suddenly he hears footsteps going all the way down the hallway. He gets up and looks, but no one was there. Everyone else was still in bed. My sister is sleeping in her bedroom, and it's in the middle of the night. She suddenly gets woken up to tugging and pulling on her blanket. She gets up to look to see who it was. Nothing but floor. After she wakes up our dad, they both search for what it might have been, but they found nothing. It's the middle of the night and suddenly my dad gets woken up to the sound of a radio coming from my sister's room. No TVs were on and we didn't even have a radio in the house at the time. He gets up to look, but nothing was there. He found nothing that could have caused the noises. One day, everyone had decided to go for a walk up and down the road. We get back to the house and we all found old scraggly hair in my sister's room. It didn't look like mine, my sister's or my dad's. Me and everyone else are sleeping in our own bedrooms. It's the middle of the night when suddenly my oldest stepsister, my dad and his ex all get woken up to a loud grinding noise coming from the basement. It sounded like a shovel scraping against concrete, and it scared my oldest stepsister pretty bad. They both went down there to see who it was, but no one was there. They were all alone. One night my dad was talking to his ex on the phone in the kitchen, when suddenly out of nowhere he hears this loud crashing noise coming from the living room. He runs in there and finds all the photos thrown right onto the floor. He doesn't know how any of it happened. He had to pick them all back up. I was alone inside the house in the dining room one day. I was being loud, just being silly and having fun. Our dad was outside at the time. Suddenly I hear this loud old man's voice coming from the basement. The voice had shouted, "Get out!" I completely stopped and listened to see if I could hear it again, but I didn't hear anything after that. I never told anyone this incident due to the fear of sounding crazy. This is my first time telling that story. However, we had a strange occurrence that would always happen. My sister's old room would always smell like alcohol, really bad, out of nowhere, like somebody was drinking really heavily in that room one time, and my sister was still a kid at the time. We would search her whole room to see where the smell was coming from, but we found nothing. Also, my old pit bull dog would always growl and bark at the corner of the walls over there, like as if there was something there that she could see and we couldn't. I often remember seeing a dark black shadow man peeking its head in at me, looking through my bedroom door in the corner of my eyes. When I turned to look, it would quickly retreat and hide behind the door or wall. I also remember seeing it pass my doorway as well. I often remember seeing the shadow man stand in the middle of my doorway in the middle of the dark. I've seen it so much that it made me scared to walk out and use the bathroom. I seen this almost every night until we moved. But another strange happening going on. My mum had left my dad, so he was left finding somewhere new. But every time he would bring a girl over to our house, the ghost seemed to get more active. We would see and hear things more and more. The very first time that my dad had ever met my stepmom was in the summer. We met her and her family at our old school we used to go to. One day we all went to the park and bought ice cream. We were all having a good time until we brought them to our house for the very first time. And keep in mind, we never said a thing to them about any paranormal activity happening around here. My youngest stepsister went walking down the hallway and into my sister's bedroom. Suddenly she sees that same old man that my sister saw standing in the road through her window, but he was standing in her room this time, the same room that always smelled like that strong alcoholic drinking smell. We asked her what he looked like and she described the same features. Really super skinny, very tall, old clothes, white long scraggly hair. However, this time both of his eyes were glowing red. He was just standing in the middle of her bedroom, staring at her through the doorway. But when she blinks, he was gone. She never seen him again. After that incident, things got so much worse. One sunny morning, me and my sister and our dad were doing homework at the dining room table. We were reading a book when suddenly my sister goes flying out of her chair and hitting the floor with extreme force. She was scared and hurt. She said it felt like something grabbed her ankle and something bumped the chair. We didn't know what to do because you can't see it. So you know there's no way of defending yourself. Another day is when our dad and our stepmum were in the basement taking photos, and at one point they take a picture in the basement bathroom. When we went and viewed the photos in the basement bathroom, we all saw this dark black shadow man peeking and looking from around the corner of the wall in the picture in the bathroom, staring right into the camera. I remember this incident well. It spooked everyone in the family at that time. One night, my sister went to bed early. We were all still up, still watching TV, when suddenly she comes running out screaming that she heard knocking on her bedroom window. Our dad goes outside to see who it was, but nobody was outside. He was completely alone. Months later, when our dad or stepmum and my sister were all sitting in the living room watching TV, I was in my bedroom playing at the time. Suddenly everyone in the living room sees this dark black shadow man in the hallway, in the corner of all their eyes. They said the shadow man was peeking its head in and looking at them in the living room through the hallway, and when they looked to see who it was, it quickly hid back in behind the wall. Before they could see it, they all went back to see who it was, but nobody was there. They found nothing. Almost every other night, our dad would always wake up to knocking on his bedroom windows. It would always start to happen at around 12 a.m. at night and end around 4 a.m. in the morning. It would always make our dogs bark, and he would need to go outside in the middle of the night to see who it was, but every time nobody was outside. But things took a turn one night. Our friend was spending the night with us one time. She was in her bed sleeping when suddenly she gets awakened by knocking on her bedroom windows too. It scared her really bad, so bad that she stayed up for almost 3 hours that night, unable to sleep. One night our dad and our stepmom were in the bedroom one night. It was around 9:30. You could just barely see outside. Suddenly, out of nowhere, there were these 4 big bangs on our big living room window that faced out into our front yard. All the dogs started to claw and bark at the windows. Both of them went outside to see who it was. We were all completely alone. My dad always gets calls in for bills and work, so when my dad had suddenly heard his phone ringing, he picks it up and answers it. My dad said, "Hello?" It was an unknown man. The man's response was, "Hello, did you call me?" My dad says back to the man, "No, I thought you called me." Then the man said, "No, I never called you either." My dad is weirded out. My dad asked the man who he was, and the man's response was, "I am a paranormal investigator that travels all around the world and investigates paranormal activity inside people's homes." My dad didn't know what to say. My dad never called the investigator, and the investigator never called him. My dad then tells the investigator, "We've been having paranormal activity happen in our home for a very long time." Then the investigator offers to come up and do an investigation inside our home. They both had each other's numbers after that incident. But instead, we ended up moving out of that house, and no investigation was launched over there. I wonder if anyone else has happened over there inside that home since we moved. The house was all redone inside again. This time, the whole inside of the house was painted a blue colour. The living room, the kitchen, the dining room, it was all painted blue. We noticed that the home was up for sale almost 3 times since we moved, as if people were moving in, then for some reason they were quickly moving out. And that's it for tonight, my little hellhounds. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed these scary stories, then don't forget to subscribe and click the like button, as this really does help the channel. And don't forget to click the bell icon so you get notified every time I upload. If you have any scary stories that you want narrated on the channel, then submit them to Reddit r/homeofscares and follow me on Twitter at homeofscares. Now, good night, my little hellhounds.